All right then. Hi, welcome to the August 1st virtual reading. Sorry about my dryer. You have 3 wonderful features to watch today. Katie Manning, Scott Ferry, and Ed Ruzicka, and an open mic that is not nearly full enough. We have 2 more spots for anyone who would like to take one. Okay, Penelope. Anyone else?
I saw
I'll
Steve
take one
raise
if
his
you have
hand.
one open.
Okay, Steve. All right, then. Our first reader today is Katie Manning, and Katie is the founding editor-in-chief of the wonderful journal Whale Road Review and a professor of writing at Point Loma Nazarene University in San Diego. She's the author of Tasty Other, which won the 2016 Main Street Rag Poetry Book Award, and her 5th chapbook, 28,065 Nights, which is available from Riverglass Books. Her poems have appeared in December, New Letters, Poet Lore, Verse Virtual, and many other venues. Her poem, What to Expect, was recently featured on the Poetry Unbound podcast from the On Being Project. Welcome, Katie.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here with you all. So since I am a little bit newer to the Verse Virtual community, I thought I would maybe read a sampler platter of poems from some of my different collections. So I'm going to start out with a newer one. I've actually been working this morning on putting together a newer chapbook of poems that respond to games. So this is a poem that was inspired by a game called Dominion, but of course it's not really about the game at all. This is Dominion Summer League. It took us 2 years to see frogs in the swamp we saw daily. Our eyes weren't trained to spot their eyes, dark lumps just above the dark water. But one day, there they were. They played their mottled music while we walked in circles, while we tried out baby names and my body expanded. At a festival, I saw people feast on frog legs. I felt sick. These creatures were too precious to eat. They're like swamp bunnies, I said. And you reminded me that people eat rabbits too. So the next poem I'm going to read is from my newest chapbook, which is 28,065 Nights. And that is the number of nights that my granny was alive. And she was kind of my other mother when I was young. I was with her a lot. So I wrote these poems after she died, and they're kind of to her and about her. And really about the larger idea of how stories keep us alive. Both the people who are trying to live in grief and the people who have died who are still alive in the stories. So this poem is How to Use Vanilla. You told me that when you were young, poor girls used vanilla extract as perfume. I imagine you rising, your scent growing stronger in the sun-baked fields. A young woman picking cotton or blueberries and adding something new. But of course, a poor girl wouldn't waste vanilla on the fields. You'd save it for secret dates, for sneaking off to carnivals. 1 drop for an older boy, 2 drops if daddy disapproved of him for driving too fast. You'd touch the small space behind each ear, hoping that your chosen boy might pick up the scent and find you delicious. A few years later, you'd bake dessert for your husband, baby balanced on your hip, and recall those warm evenings, the thrill of a field boy's rough palm. I suddenly understand why, whenever you made simple syrup for waffles, you always replaced the maple with vanilla. And then I'll go ahead and read the final poem from this collection, which is the title poem, 28,065 Nights. I tell your stories to keep myself alive. I tell you new stories. I speak them aloud to you when no one is around, the way you used to talk to Grandpa in your bedroom after his death. The stories play on repeat in my head. I write them down. I tell them to Elliot when he asks. A year later, he still remembered you, but I don't know how long his memories from two will last. To him, you will be more story than person. Are we always more story than person? Words thicker than water? I got the wave of your hair and your lack of wisdom teeth. I did not get your metabolism that let you eat 6 hot dogs at one cookout, but I get to keep that story, more necessary now than blood or breath. So the next couple poems I'll read are from my full-length book, Tasty Other, which has this wonderfully creepy cover. And this book explores, I like to say, all of the wonder and terror of becoming a mother. That transition was quite startling for me. So I'm going to read the opening poem, which is called Week by Week, and it responds to those pregnancy calendars that are like, this week your baby's the size of an orange, and this week your baby is the size of whatever. So I found those really amusing. So this is Week by Week. Oh, and I should also tell you, if you don't like math, just don't listen to this. But this poem follows the Fibonacci sequence, and it's line by line syllable count. It was fun to play with for that idea of the rapidly expanding child. So week by week. At this time, your offspring is invisible. Now a speck, the dream of seed and root. Baby is a dime, quarter, increasing in value. Golf ball, gerbil, your own palm. Then more sports equipment, softball, football, racquetball court. By this point, your baby is a train, a field, a city, an ocean. This week, baby is the sky. Now a hemisphere, now a blurry world. And the other poem I'll read from this collection, thank you, I see your comments in the chat, thank you. The other poem I'll read from this collection is called The Leaves Left. And I really did wake up one morning with this strange sentence repeating in my head. So of course, anytime I woke up with a bizarre anxiety dream or language that came to me, that happened a lot during my first pregnancy. So I used all of that as fodder for poetry. I kept quite the strange journal next to my bed. So, and since it is August, I have to read this poem because it shouts out to the month. So, The Leaves Left. Some morning soon I will wake with a sentence repeating in my head. The leaves left an impression on the boy. I will not remember my dream or have any clue what these words want. The leaves left an impression on the boy. I'll get up and jot them down in my notebook. The leaves left an impression on the boy. I will turn the words over while I flip some eggs, while I walk to work. I'll think of them over dinner and as I fall asleep the next night. The leaves left an impression on the boy. I'll repeat this line like a mantra for the following 4 weeks. In the heat of August days, I will hear the autumn come. And then the final poem I'll read for you. This is from my first chapbook. It looks like a full-length book because it was published so beautifully and perfect bound, but it is a chapbook, and it is The Gospel of the Bleeding Woman. And in that project, I imagined a life for an unnamed character from the Bible. She's in 3 of the gospel accounts. She interrupts Jesus when he's really on his way to heal someone else. She's been bleeding for 12 years. And so I imagined a life for her and gave her a name and had a really wonderful time exploring that figure who was always fascinating to me. But while I was writing those poems, she kept jumping out of her time and place. And I was really resistant to it at first because I was like, I'm trying to do some serious work here, some serious historical kind of work here. But she had other ideas apparently as my character. And so I finally just let myself write. So this is a poem from later in the collection where she completely jumps out of her time and place, and she's in New York, and she meets Jesus. So this is Where Death Is Not an Is. And at the time, I'll tell you, I was reading Brian Henry's book, Quarantine. So I have an after Brian Henry on here because some of his language kind of crept in and haunted me as I was writing this poem. Where Death Is Not an Is. I met Jesus the next day at the Life Cafe. Call me Jay now, he said. People lock me up when I say I am God. He pulled back his sleeves to show the marks on his arms from recent shots. I asked what I could do. Just lie low, he said, between bites of falafel. Dead is the way the world wants us. People hate to feel alive. We ate in silence for a while. Then I asked, what happens to us? He wiped his young hands and stood to leave. We are finished, and kissed my cheek. I put my hand on his arm and told him the scars would be beautiful when they healed. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. Please, I urge you to put your links into the chat so that people can find your books and get them. Thank you so much. Our next reader is Scott Ferry, who has a brief but succinct bio. Scott Ferry helps our veterans heal as an RN. In his former lives, he taught high school and practiced acupuncture. His third book of poetry, These Hands of Myrrh, is due out from Kelsey Books in late 2021. You're going to use up all those publishers who produce so many books. That's great. Okay, go ahead, Scott.
I should probably unmute myself. Hello, everybody. Jumping off from that succinct bio, I wrote a poem about reading really super long bios. And it kind of, I'll just start it. After reading lengthy poet bios, Scott Ferry helps rust heal as a luminous waif. He has been published inside the orbits of seafowl eyes, under the blanket of slug sex, and through the lies children tell to survive. Most recently, he was a finalist in the sticked insect long form of a misplaced martial art. His heart takes too long to recharge between Q and T, so you shouldn't allow him to eat antihistamine Twinkies wrapped in Zofan bacon. He used to tell jokes to stop the bathwater from flooding the foyer, but the stains never do go away. He can hold his breath for years and wait for talons of extinct raptors to scrape the frost from the windshield. The canyon will have gone quiet by now. Even the coyotes shrink into cracks. You shouldn't be in this bio. The floorboards are as brittle as time, and you have to sneak out of here without waking. It's best to consume nachos after the kitchen dies. If you're lucky, your daughter will say she can't sleep. Get her coat on and go into the backyard to look at the stars, asking, what is the first star called? The midnight star? I thought it was Venus. But it flickered, she implores. You will have no answer for her, but that is fine, because it is better if she makes her own names for stars, especially first ones. All right, I'm going to read a few poems from this book. I got the mock-up already, yay. And this, These Hands of Myrrh from Kelsey Books. After I find my daughter's beta dead, bleached in silver on the turquoise rocks, she begins to stick, bleached in silver on the turquoise rocks, she begins to stick pearls into the dark openings, begins to describe how a body without a soul is first a monster, then a wind without ribs, then just a body, and the other parts are flying without bones or face, just the light in the air. And she can hear gills near her ear. The fish says good things and mean things. He was scared because he couldn't see and kept spitting out his food even after the medicine we gave him for weeks. He knew we tried to save him, but he was scared, and then he couldn't breathe and fell upside down, mouth gulping, until his body stopped and a young silver fish flipped his tail through the glass now seeing all the bright water. All right. I'm a nurse, so I have quite a few poems in this book about nursing. I'm going to do the kind of more low-key one. My patient does not want to live. My job today is to sit with him for 12 hours so he doesn't try to open the blood or close the air. He has not wanted to eat, but this morning he allows French toast and sugar-free syrup to nourish him. He even drinks his milk. But when the young doctors arrive, he barely answers them. The mid-20s man asks, "How does your body feel today?" And my patient answers, "It lets me know it is here." He throws a few more answers onto the ground, and the doctors shrug at me and slink out perplexed. My patient is in his 60s, has bilateral AKAs, above knee amputations. Doesn't feel like defecating more than once a week. I ask him what he wants to watch. He chooses a paranormal investigation show. Are you still there? How many of you are still there? The young researcher asks into the dark night vision film rolling blank blue and yellow. A thunderous moan comes out of the corner and they all spin around, monitors flickering. I ask my patient, "Have you had any experiences with ghosts?" He nods. "Oh, yes." I inquire, "Did you grow up in a haunted house or something?" "Nope." And then he just looks at me. And when I look back, he pretends he is staring at something behind me. The whiteboard with its food intake, his urine output displayed in dry erase. I want to hear his stories. I want to release his ghosts, which spin opaque behind the glass, which inhabit his body still. All right. This one has a lot of repetition. Ouroboros as a stuffed boy. My father makes me a puppet in his mirror. I am meant to replace his lost youth. My youth lost, my father now a puppet. I don't mean to perform for a mirror. I still try to replace for him, even though he cannot reflect, cannot atone, cannot puppet. I already feel I need to deserve to perform a reflectionless puppet in a mirror. I still try to replace someone to please, a god lost, a puppet in a brimless sky. My wife keeps telling me I don't need to deserve, that the puppet and the boy and the son and the man are all right as they are, even lost, even asleep, even crying, even too scared of reflections. I hold up this puppet of my lost body, the one who is supposed to be loved even with his seams ripped. I hold up, but then I can't deserve without performing in front of the God mirror, thinking, "Look at me, Father. How holy this pain." All right. This one, I just tried to kind of use some negative space. So you'll see every line kind of just trails off into where you have to end it as a reader. Awful, meaning meat, not something is totally awful. Once auras began glowing from everyone, I knew I was either insane or my father had just died. Maybe this was grief bleaching over my sclera. Maybe I wasn't. Once I could feel God, I knew I should not speak about. My life was crumbling, my first teaching job a failure, my purpose, once I could hear the dead, I knew they were submerged in the, it hasn't changed, it hasn't changed. I hold my family, I try to bring some heliotrope through the gate. I try to bring chrysanthemum skin through. God doesn't see these blisters flowering. If I pretend God doesn't exist, if I offer a platter of chocolate livers, I offer crisp entrails, right recipes for. My daughter asked me about ghosts. I don't want to scare her. I want to tell her about the words. I want to tell her, but the words don't carry through the scalding. The words can't.
Thank you, Scott. I think that's 10 minutes. Thank you very much. That was a wonderful set. Please put the links to your books, including the new one, if there's if that's possible in the chat.
Thank you all.
Our final feature today was raised beside creeks and cornfields near Chicago. Ed Ruzicka is an occupational therapist in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Ed takes many takes on the rocky marriage between freedom and the American highway, or in his second book, My Life in Cars. Ed's poems have appeared in the Atlanta Review, Rattle, and Canary, as well as myriad other literary journals and anthologies. With his wife, Renee, he enjoys sitting on a back patio that backs up to the rest of the world. I guess that's one of your cars, Ed.
This is the cover of the book. I put it up because, not because I'm going to read from it, but because Charlie did my friend Charlie gave it such a beautiful caddy cover. And I believe that lots of stuff happens in cars in America, and somebody had to address it, you know? So I'll put that link later. Matter of fact, what I want to say is that my website that I'll put the link up has like really nice, I think, pictures with quotes from the book embedded in it. And it's a 1 minute, slideshow. And it doesn't take much time, gives you a sense of who and what I like to do. And I'm going to read first from a poem called Skunked Angels. Can we do screenshot? Can I put it up there? Share screen? No, okay.
Wait a minute. I can make you another co-host.
Okay, well, I'll just read this one and I'll put something up later. I'll try it again later.
Try it.
Try it now?
Yeah.
Okay, you're fast. Okay, no, I'm not gonna be able to do, let me see if this is it. Let's see. Yeah, Skunked Angels.
Make it longer. I mean, bigger.
That I won't be able to do that. You can't read it?
It's awfully small, but
Okay.
It's readable. It's readable on my screen, although we don't see the end.
Okay.
Robbie, we can all make it bigger. If you go up to view options and you click on that, then you see zoom ratio and you go to the right and you can make it as big as you want.
I'm just going to go ahead with what we got because I'm not a technological wizard. That's an understatement. Skunked Angels. My fellow deckhand, Ronnie, escaped a gang of Nashville dealers, hitched down to the Gulf to cold turkey off heroin. I'm just tying bowlines for summer bucks. On a deadbeat Saturday, Ronnie hooks us up with a local Yahoo stoned out of his gourd at 4 p.m. We loll on this local's front porch. He doesn't move or twitch for an hour. Then 2 hummingbirds dip and join at the hip just above tridents of canna lilies. This guy throws his head back and cries out, "Damn if that ain't cuter than a spotted pup in a new red wagon." The 3 of us end up at last call in a bar with an interior decor like an oil slick in wrenched seas. Everyone is stiff, silent, pickled until the needle drops into K23 on the jukebox. Deckhands, crew boat captains, Ronnie, the local, boiler masters, and a few Debs sing in unison to no one in particular, low, breathy, bent into bar or tabletop where brown bottles are microphones. It's a chorus of skunked angels without a soprano in the bunch. Back in Lukenbach, Texas, ain't nobody feeling no pain. We sing as if these words hold the only hope around, and the song itself is what sheds light off mirror glass. So the next poem I'm going to read is also a poem about place, a group that I have. It's from Atalaya, Peru, August 1979, called The Dutch Girl. Determined to see Amazonian canopies, I go over the Andes in a cargo plane that touches down on a grass airstrip. I walk the single stripe of street straight to the single hotel. At the hotel bar, a squad of Peruvian Marines adopts me. The Marines have flown in to recover the body of a Dutch girl drowned in the Tambo. For 3 days, these Marines take me out in a powerboat, dive into every conceivable snarl of the river's treacherous currents. Late afternoons, we venture to pubs or pad towel over shoulder through jungle tangle to a jade pool under a waterfall. On the 4th morning, I wake up with yellow eyes. On the 7th, I catch a flight out to Lima where MDs can properly treat jaundice and leave behind a group of men grown restless as fish continue to disrobe and enjoy the Dutch girl. The next one I'm going to read is The Wild Fire Pit. It's not, it's beside the fire pit. If I grow still as we sit on the patio for the last blaze of the season, as it rages in wild, wind-licked tongues, roars its furious throat of heat up a narrow chimney, know that I have not gone anywhere. I've only slipped into a state where the dead come silent close. Your sister lifts hands of need from her lap. The bulldog we lost last fall is at our feet again. My brother, almost erased, yet through memory, he tries to show what I might do to make things better. His heart is still that good. It is a balance we have to reach, the dead, even with the living. Gears. If I worked in the wheelhouse of the sun, I would keep a steady hand, the way a tiller leans into the muscle and swell of a sea to guide his ship toward a spot on the far horizon. I would make sure what light was given day in, day out to the lilies whose flowers are trumpet blasts of exaltation, to the purple lilies whose tongues furrow with or without wind, to the white lilies so their immaculate satin could shimmer, and the native roses that swirl inward toward a marvelous secret. Every morning I would sit beside a window smudged with grime to dip elementary biscuits into coffee. Later, I would take a sandwich out of its flimsy bag, enjoy it slowly, the way a philosopher turns pages in dim light. I would help lift the great lion of the sun into noon, far above clouds that drift like schooners and whose shadows swallow the copse while sheep graze on a hillside and crickets trill metallic tunes. I would wake early, come to work with an unmatched faithfulness, walking under the granite of mountain shadow, with only the iced light of stars to guide. In this manner, my life would progress as if driven by enormous gears, kept out of sight while one tooth bites another to roll the future from a mouse cave with utter and determined calm, instead of this pitch and heave of days that swells beneath my feet, this fever of life that confuses me with its dreams and desires. And I think I have time for one more. I hope it's a relatively short poem called One Cup Brimming. Now that I am old, with an old man's problems and my organs revolt against me, I am allowed only soft sips from a favorite cup, brimmed with dark draughts of coffee on special occasions, like today, which is Monday, special and fresh. Monday sits in its own square on the calendar, has been waiting almost a week for me there. 7 moons swept over the crowns of our trees. I grind beads, heat water to steam. The salt and pepper shakers glimmer gauze white behind that steam. I tip a practice spout of scald hot water into the paper filter and its grounds. Water seeps through dark grains. I hold every mouthful on my tongue, the way my hands sometimes linger on your hip, your left shoulder, at the base of your neck, my love, while we are under stars, while we drift into yet another unmoored night, in darkness, into darkness, which I may also treasure soon enough and for longer. Thank you very much. Thank you, Robbie. Thank you, Verse Virtual. I'll put the link up on my site. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful, Ed. That was a treat. Now, what was that? I'm sorry.
I gotta take my screen.
Yeah. You,
somehow.
Okay, I'm stopping there.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah.
I can barely work an elevator.
you know, everything breaks when I touch it, but I got used to it because I had to, because the pandemic. So you'd be surprised what you can learn if you need to. So now we'll move into the second half of our program, which is the open mic, which is now, I believe, full. So we'll start out with Joan Leota, who didn't know she was reading, but now she does. But you have to unmute yourself, Joan. That's the first thing.
I'm sorry, Robbie. Thank you. Am I supposed to read one or two, do you think? I can't hear you now. There we go.
Two.
Okay.
Unless they're extremely
No, they're
long.
not huge. They're not huge. I don't write extremely long anymore. I've given up trying to be Virgil. Okay. Magritte's apple explains it all. This was written about a Magritte painting where a giant apple fills a room as a green apple, for those who want details. But anyway, one look at this canvas and I knew the likely answer to the conundrum in my heart. Why, in the 20 years since she has left this earth, have I not dreamt of my mother? In dream time, that world between the known and the mystery residing in every soul, it's those moments when the conscious mind relaxes, joining with the matter that is deep inside us, sinking into those subconscious depths as far as God allows. That is the process we call dreaming, the place, the land of dreams. In that land, I've often met or talked with or watched my grandmother, aunts, father, and son. All of these departed beloveds have spoken to me, my son directly. Only my mother has not appeared. She has never even walked across my mental stage in a cameo. Occasionally, I worry, I admit. Is this because she thinks I did not love her enough in life to remain connected? How can that be when I loved and still love her very much? In life, we laughed and argued, so much to say to one another. The outspoken, never predictable mother who tried to harden the shell of a too soft, by her ken, daughter. I wear her jewelry, cook her recipes. I chuckle over her sayings, and regularly, though she's been gone for more than 20 years, when I open the drawers of her wooden vanity, the aroma of youth dew, her favorite scent, wafts up to meet me. So now, looking at Magritte, I understand. My mother does not need to wait for night to return to me. She fills my days still in many ways. She has not come in dreams because she's never really left my waking time. She fills the room of my consciousness, a crisp green love apple of a mother, larger than life, even in death. That's a newish one. I've not sent that anywhere yet. So, and then I didn't know what else to read, and I heard Kate read a splendid frog poem. Now this is not to that level of splendid. I don't think I sent it out, and it was picked up by a place called the Frog House And in fact, they even sent me a tiny amount of money, which might pay postage if I were still using postage for something. So, but it kind of, it's, well, anyway, I'll just read it to you and I hope you enjoy it. Frog songs. Frog sits on my window pane to watch TV with us, singing with the talent shows, except on nights it rains. Those nights he remains settled at the edge of our drain pipe with his friends in his frog house. As water flows down over them, they breathe deeply and let loose a serenade, a song that flows until rain ends. So many songs to the tune of summer rains. My frogs sing of birds and flowers, of clean air, clean water, of swamp lilies, tall grass, gators, turtles, snakes, and fish. Before the cold sends them into hiding, I hear in their last summer songs a charge for me to keep watch, so that when spring returns, they will find the world ready for new melodies, ready to enjoy together from the window and through their songs.
Thank you, Joan. That was delightful.
I'm glad.
And you know, any money from a journal is gravy.
Yes, actually, it's going to be read to children at a place to teach them about frogs.
Okay, great.
That's where the didactic element came in.
Our
Thank you.
You're welcome. Our second reader at the open mic is Ingrid Brook. Go ahead with your two, Ingrid.
I'm reading from Finding Stella Maris, and it's a retreat house that no longer exists. It closed in 2013. It's about two of the sisters I knew from the house. Groundhog's Turn, dedicated to Sister Claire McNerney. I moved to a house with an acre of land, plant tomatoes in the garden and plants on the porch. A groundhog comes and feasts, no more tomatoes. I grow them in wine kegs. A thief climbs into the barrels, no more tomatoes. I wrap wire mesh around each keg. One scales the fence, drops in and gorges, no more tomatoes. My husband builds a plant shelf on the back porch. Pot stands 7 feet from the ground. We eat tomatoes. Plump, fresh, bright red, heavy orbs. Sweet, juicy mouthfuls of summer. Delicious tomatoes. And a woodchuck gobbles my flowers. I get a live animal trap. Relocate pests from over the river, but some trek back. A muncher always moves in. No matter what, there's an excess of groundhogs. There has to be a better way. I drive to Stella Maris' house where Sister Claire tends the grounds. She'll know what to do. Before I talk to her, I visit the organic garden where Romas, cherries, and big boys flourish. I ask, how do you get rid of groundhogs? Sister smiles and says, they have to eat too. There's enough for all of us. And my second poem is about Sister Frances Scanlon. They're both sisters of St. Joseph of Peace. And this is when it was the last day in the house before it was sold. Last rites. Sister Frances stays to the end, alone in Stella Maris retreat house. A day after Christmas, she lets herself in. Sister Claire, gone. Guests gone. Staff gone. All gone, except Sister Lois, who leaves 2 days later. On January 1st, new owners take possession. The last 4 days in December, Sister Frances, alone in the nuns' quarters, sits last rites for the house to the rhythm of sun, moon, and ocean. She walks stairs and hallways, past 50 bedrooms, tidies the kitchen, prays in the chapel, strolls garden, bluff, beach, walks the labyrinth. At the end of each day, she climbs up 42 steps and falls asleep in her bed, counting waves. Stella Maris was home. Her reflection lives in the black marble corridor where she glided to chapel, along with thousands of souls who found peace there. On the last day of the year, Sister Frances locks the door. Before she leaves, she takes her key and throws it in the sea. That's my very first chapbook, and it's Finding Stella Maris. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much. That was moving. I'm next. I very seldom take a spot on the open mic. In fact, I think this is the first time. So I can read you one longer one or two short ones. So raise your hand if you want long. Nope. Okay, two short ones it is. So these are two poems from my as yet unhomed chapbook, which is called Plated. And the poems are about chefs from Netflix, The Chef's Table. Death happens, Alex Attila. That's what his t-shirt says, this accidental chef, aging punk rocker, reminding us that every dish requires a death. Looking away so as not to see the blood, the stained axe buried in the stump, doesn't change that. He's a celebrity, appearing on the covers of GQ, dressed in biker black, but spends half of his time wandering the Amazon, learning from indigenous farmers how to build a better food chain. Brazil speaks through his fingers, giving us a flavor or a scent not always comfortable or pleasant, elemental, the dark taste of ants, so much like lemongrass and ginger. Here's another one. Homegrown, Sean Brock. You grew up in the green Virginia hills, sliding on slag heaps, overgrown with Jimson weed and kudzu, a childhood out of a dream, before your father died at 39 and you became apprentice in your grandmother's garden and kitchen, hoeing and peeling, feeding the murky jug of vinegar, its regular cup of wine, watering and weeding, putting by the family's food for winter. In those hills, everyone had a garden where they teased out novel strains, varieties to bear the family name at county fairs and farmers markets. A richness disappearing even then, streaked and spotted beans, sweet melons, tomatoes, lumpy and fragrant, far from the corporate consistency we've grown to prize. Later, you searched for those lost seeds, tracing foods brought over on the slave ship, mixed new methods with the old, cooking the same few dishes obsessively for months to get them perfect, brewing, planting, till your body just about gave out. At 39, the age your father died, you finally learned to live, standing in a field, enjoying what you made, as God must have rested under the broad branches of the live oak before leaving the world to its own wild ways. Thank you. Wish me luck finding a home for that. It's already been rejected about 12 times. So. Our next reader, I don't think Jennifer Abode is here. I don't see her. So unless she's hiding under a leaf, our next reader is Judy Cronenfeld.
Hi, it's really good to see everyone. I've been out of commission for a pretty long time, so I'm delighted to see you all and be here. I'm going to read a poem I don't think I've ever read recently, at least, maybe in a public reading. And it's a poem that has something to do with teaching, which I did for many, many years, and is based on something that I did see in a textbook and what happened in class. It's called Comic Relief for English Teachers. In a brick of a textbook for students processing the history of modern poetry at a clip, on one of almost 2,000 pages, thin as puff pastry layers, 8 lines of gorgeous stately iambics into Stevens's Sunday morning, a clam darkens among water lights instead of a calm. The teacher guffawed when she saw it, preparing her lecture notes, yet there was no eruption of student giggling, even when their books lay open on their desks. Was it wrong not to note that minuscule typo in her syllabus, rather than wait for class to clue the students in for entertainment's sake? Sparsely, they chuckled. Should she have sympathized with those oblivious as clams, buried deep in the decorum of the moment? Was she wrong to hope some few would be released by irreverent comic relief and start to read as if they could get the news from poems? When she learned she'd teach that course again, just thinking of that little bivalve and imagining the new class would find it, brought on a rising chortle of pleasure she could barely contain. And when that clam darkened among water lights on that still glaring page, she whooped out loud and breathed a cleansing breath before opening her heart and almost drowning once more in the loveliness of poems she wanted so much to, but feared she could not share. And I will read something completely unrelated, which I decided to read simply on the basis of my feelings about Ed's last poem, which was just so moving to me. It's a gorgeous poem, Ed. And this is very atypical style for me. It is pure images, nothing discursive at all. How it is in time. The thin skin of the arms imprinted like sand, over which waves have drawn back and come hissing in, sweeping across each other, leaving their echoes like netting. And invisible beneath the skin, the bones of translucent porcelain, their lattices growing lacier, starker, like branches in a winter forest of birch. And hair of hoarfrost feathers, retinal smoke and mirrors, spindle ankle dizziness, then something, a silvery harp arpeggio, ice-sheathed twigs tinkling in a mild wind, a prelude to some memory. But after, only an unblemished Arctic whiteness, like music's silence.
Thanks, Judy. Wonderful, as always. Penelope, it's your turn.
Hi, this is a great reading. I'm so glad
Oh, you blanked out on us. We can't hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right, I just said that this is a great reading. I'm really glad that I came to hear all of you. Wonderful poems. I am right now in the middle of the Poetry Postcard Festival, which this is my 4th year of doing it, where you write first draft poems onto the backs of postcards and send them to strangers. So I'm going to read you 2 of those. Pink. A pink bathing cap wants to chat in the middle of the wide ocean, out past the breakers. Like me, she mostly swims in a pool. She can't persuade her friends to swim in salt. But here we are, surrounded by kelp and unseen fishes, maybe sharks. And there, far away, is the shore. We know we'll get rolled and smashed on the sand when we try to return. So these are from this week. They're very new. That was Wednesday. I'm actually going to read you this morning's. I'm getting a lot out of that one trip to the ocean on Tuesday. At night, sand migrated from the unslept-on side of the bed to the slept-on side, where the restless sleeper twisted the sheets. As if pushed onto shore by arriving and departing waves of sleep, it moved under and over the covers from where it had sifted out of the beach chair, briefly set on the coverlet 3 days before. As if it were a sandman come to comfort the sand woman, who in the barely there light of early morning rhythmically sweeps it out of the bed to the floor. Thank you for listening.
I missed a reader who was right in front of my nose, Jim, our estimable editor. So you're next.
I'm really glad that Joan is still here. I don't know if you will remember this, Joan, but in a conversation or a post on Facebook, you mistyped "I lived in San Francisco in the late 50s," and you typed "I loved in San Francisco in the late 50s." I took that and ran with it. I'm going to read one poem called San Francisco. I loved in San Francisco in the late 50s. Never mind who or why or how long or even how many. I lost count. Edna would understand that. Understand the lone trees that in winter bare their souls for careless birds. Frost was there too, close, warm. He loved cats, or so he said, then gave the fog their feet to tiptoe in on. Quiet, a luxury in that busy place, defined not as the absence of noise, but of all human noise. The beach, the waves, the sunsets from Alcatraz, burning that famous bridge like God burned a bush to make Moses stop and listen. Just listen. The bush, the bridge, neither was consumed. I loved in San Francisco, deeply, desperately, but far too soon for the famous summer, the rebellion against the old guard. Too early to pretend I was the one who started it all. On gray mornings, when I felt no affection, no connection to anyone around me, I would stand alone on the Presidio cliffs, watching the morning mists obscure the towers of the Golden Gate, hide the passing of love.
Is that all?
Yes, I'm only doing one.
Okay. All right. Okay. Steve, you're next. Is Steve still here?
Yes.
Okay.
So Zoom is telling me that my network bandwidth is low. So if my voice gets bad, let me know. I'll turn off the video. So I'm going to read two, a short one and a slightly longer one. These are both from my most recent book, which is Context, Voices, and Dreams. First one's called Dandelions Lament, which I found out after I wrote it is not an uncommon title. My golden locks have turned wind-blown white, and now they call me nuisance, the traitors who once played games with me. And those children I knew so well now stare blank-eyed and forgetful, as if I wasn't here, invisible, a weed, or chew cow-like on my bitter leaves, forgetting their own salad days as they stumble ever closer to oblivion. But for those few, those very few, who remember what I once was and still am, I bid you this, make a wish. Scatter my children to the wind so that your children's children's children someday can make one too. Can you hear me or no? Yes, okay. All right, so that was one. I hadn't read that one before, so here's a second one. This one is an object lesson. It's called Sun Seeker. She married a cautious man, a kind man, a safe choice, someone who could provide for her, someone who would be kind and gentle, someone who would treat her parents well, unlike her sister who married an abusive guitarist with a drinking problem and other problems. Someone to have children with, unlike her brother who married a landscaper with a bedraggled beard and a bad back. She wanted someone to live a life with. He loved her all of her days. He was her tropical flower, and she was his tropical flower, and he was her supporting stem and green leaves and all that. But while he was cautious and wore large hats and hid from the sun and drank in moderation, she binged on alcohol and sunshine, baking her pale northern skin in the Florida heat every winter, until it matched the Hawaiian girl in the bottle of suntan lotion, the girl with the lustrous dark hair, wide exotic mouth, suggestive eyes, and strategically placed coconut shells. A woman who, not unlike the Marlboro man, died of cancer. He from the inside out, and the girl in the bottle from the outside in. Her name, the girl in the bottle, was Noelani, meaning mist of heaven, a heaven she reached before her 50th birthday. Her name, the Sun Seeker, was Amabel, a name whose meaning she never knew, shortened to Mabel whenever out of her mother's earshot. She dreamed of faraway places with tropical seas and waving palms, and every summer raced to change herself into a more exotic creature with the assistance of the summer sun, so much stronger than its anemic off-season self in the pale winters of Oskaloosa. So she married the cautious man. It was easy. He was so smitten with her, and lived a happily ordinary life, raised 2 strapping sons, vacationed in warm places in the winter, and soaked up the sun. But then, in her 42nd year, she began noticing the spots on her skin that stayed brown when all the rest reverted to paleness in the Oskaloosa springtime and fall, when she was either summering in the north or wintering in the south. Like Noelani, whose image she had memorized, but whose name she'd never know. By 50, she was dead, struck down by spots she stared at in the mirror, but refused to name aloud, unable to comprehend the reality that she was betrayed by her own skin. The shade navigator, the cautious man, her husband, outlived her by 45 years, a grandfather and great-grandfather many times over. Yet he always, no matter how many years had passed, bought flowers for her on her birthday, exotic orchids and tropical jasmine, and drank a toast to her on their anniversary, and bought a bottle of tanning lotion, the same brand she always used, every year on the anniversary of her death, and lit it on fire in the parking lot of the drugstore where she always bought it, grinding the oily ashes into the asphalt under the heel of his shoe.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That was moving. Our last reader on the open mic is Wendy Carlos.
I thought there wasn't room for me, but I'll just read one since I'm new to
I wrote back to you.
Oh, I just didn't see it. Since I'm new to Verse Virtual and Ed invited me to this reading, I'm going to read a poem that I wrote when I was living in Texas. Because if you get on 71 in Texarkana, Texas, and drive directly south, you will get to Lafayette, Louisiana, which is the home of Cajun culture. And this is a poem about that. The named bands are Zydeco bands. And all the stuff you don't know is Louisiana culture, probably. Myself, on the left, the Chufalaya, so black, so burnt inside, silent as a pot. Down here, our lips equal silt and common bliss. Down here, we carry our graves folded in our pockets, a cardboard hunger, a box and shards. The woman beside me in this food line wears a skin-tight skirt, has a backdoor man. Down south, we have the right to costumes and gossip, to numbers and pawn. Down south, we observe the bendable rules that stand in for bone. Below Missouri, we have a chicory bias. Low blues and Jolie Blonde are the national anthem. Down here, I learned acoustics from Professor Longhair, religion from the Mardi Gras gods, patience in February's saxophone wind. Like buckwheat and the meters, I adjust my heartbeat to the pulse of the tune. I am the snake half of the gator. Despite the facts of jazz, I'm as romantic as a bad house band. I still think of salvation every time. Night train, sugarcane, souffle, étouffée, the key to muddy silence is under my tongue. Where your world gapes open, darling, mine shivers in. Thank you.
That was wonderful. I'm glad that you got a chance to read on the open mic today. Well, that about does it for today. And I haven't put together the reading for next month yet. It's been a wild month. I'm sure it's going to be a wild month to come. So have a great whatever, and I'll see you next time, and probably before.
Thank you very
All of you
much.
for coming.
Robbie, thank you, Robbie.
You're welcome.
you.
Thank you,
everybody.
all
It
of
was
you.
lovely.
Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful readings. Thank
Yeah,
you.
excellent sets and open mic. Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Really incredible.
Bye.
Bye.
I'm going to stop the